Welcome to AHA, A Human Among Humans, which is Michael Koran's weekly show here on CCTV. And my name is Michael Mack, and Michael has very graciously invited me on to do another segment of the God Talk guys. So we're going to talk about God in all of his guises.
And hers.
And hers.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Because Isabel is watching.
Isabel is watching. Yes. Isabel is one of our, is one of you. And she took us a little bit to task for, what was the word that she used?
Goofy. Goofing around.
Goofing around. Goofing around with our topic.
Yep.
Goofing around with God. And so we'll get very serious now. Let's get very serious.
No, we decided that we needed to goof around, didn't we?
Decided to what?
Goof around, but in a meaningful way.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So all of our goofing around
is for the good.
is for the good.
Yes. And so do we have a burning question that we need to answer in this half hour that we have together?
Do you have one?
I always have one.
Oh, good. I don't have any.
I think that you do have one.
I do have one?
I think that you do.
Oh, okay.
I think that you wrote it down and then answered it.
Oh.
And before this half hour is over, we're going to have the answer
I do
from
have
he who knows.
No, I do have a question too, yes.
Okay, what is your question?
Oh, mine? Yours is, even though you don't want to go first?
My question, my general question, the question that I've been asking myself often lately is who or what is God? So this is a question that I have come with some working answers to, answers that help me, and so I have like my own little catechism of answers. But you also have a very similar question, don't you?
Not today. Today?
Oh?
No, I wrote that answer. What I wrote was to make clear Michelle's question and yours to answer that. But today the question is, for me, feeling God's presence, opening to it, and trying to keep my heart open, which is habitually protected and closed. How to be when I feel the flow or presence or my expanding self or my expanding body self, whatever word or higher self, whatever word you want to call it. If I am learning to be with this presence more and more, but it's confusing to me of how to be with it.
Can I back up just a little bit? For those of us who don't have access to the presence that you're feeling, can you talk a little bit about what that is or what that means? Or can you describe it? I mean, if I were to come to you with the question that I posed a little bit earlier and ask who or what is this presence?
Yes, but you've had this experience.
Do you know that
church.
I know?
From at least
you imagine that I know.
No, what you talk about when you pray, you feel whole and loved, and I mean, people feel this in 12-step programs, or I'm sure you feel this when you pray from time to time.
You are imagining and assuming a lot of things.
Yes, I could be wrong.
You could be wrong.
I'm open to being wrong.
Which brings me back to my question to you.
Yes.
You know, for somebody who has not had this experience, could you talk a little bit about what it means to have this presence? What is this presence?
It's very hard. I mean, people who haven't seen a tree, it would be hard to describe a tree.
True.
So I could say I feel peaceful. I feel when I open my heart, I still have to kind of consciously, like opening the shutters, remind myself to open my heart. It's like a reminder. Like in the morning when I go out on my roof to face all the directions, and in some way maybe prayer, I put my hand on my heart and my third eye to remind myself of that. And I'm sure I need to do it more. Like Muslims pray 5 times a day, and people in orders pray many times. I think you told me 7 times a day.
I believe it's 7 in the Catholic orders.
And the Jews, I understand all of these, what is called rituals. I'm not sure those are fair words. But washing your hands, praying before eating, praying after eating, is an attempt to get more and more, because we forget.
We do forget.
More and more reminders until eventually, as learning any sport, right? Larry Bird would spend all summer with the turnaround jumper.
Yes.
And be able to do it.
Until it becomes second nature.
Yes.
Until it's just a part of who we are and what we do.
And Rhino, becoming better and better, still hasn't learned to really get 80% of his foul shots in. So that you just keep practice. It's the same thing.
Celtics are playing tonight.
Yes, late, 8:30 at the beginning. Yeah. So it's the same thing as and you have been working on a show for over 15 years now, right?
I have been.
So you understand practice, and you get more
absolutely.
and more into the ease and grace of performing it, right?
Well, we were talking a little bit earlier about, I mean, what you're suggesting now, what you're approaching when you talk about the various orders or the various practices and various religions of coming to prayer several times a day, many times a day. What you're coming to is the idea of prayer without ceasing, which was one that I believe that St. Paul suggested in one of his letters to the new Christians, that become our practice, that we pray without ceasing, that prayer become a daily part of our lives. And in the rituals that you're describing, in the washing and in the eating and the preparations, that this is a way to remind ourselves that we are connected to some great purpose, some great mysterious being or movement, and to remember that we're here for a little while to do what we do, but there is something greater of which we are a part. And the awareness of that greatness can bring us into a sense of ease or a sense of peace, because the little lives that we're desperately at times concerned. I certainly know myself. I'm desperately concerned with my life and where it goes and what happens with it. But it's good to remember from time to time, often, it's good to remember that there is something larger that we're just a little part of.
And a big part of. It's us too.
And the big part of. Thank you.
I mean, we're in the image of God.
Yes.
That's pretty big.
Yes.
That is big.
Yes. Yeah. So, getting back to the question about this presence, my own, if I may,
please,
my own prayer practice is one of very similar to you, actually. You talked about the third eye and you talked about the heart, and that's where I begin because I come from the Catholic tradition. So I bring my attention to my mind and to my heart and to my body and to all of my being, and open all of myself to this, to the Lord, as I call the great presence. The word that seems to work the best for me. And to invite the Lord into this moment and into this prayer and to guide it in the way that He will and in the way that He does. And in that process, I let go of something. I let go of some smaller self, this little self that I'm constantly, desperately worried about. And for a little while, I am suspended above. This is metaphor for it, but I'm suspended. I'm in suspension, and so I'm not really a part of this little self in the same kind of way. And sometimes it brings peace, and sometimes it doesn't. But it always seems to bring an awareness of something else, an awareness of something other that is also intimately a part of myself, something so close to myself that I don't know the difference between it and me. And at this point, it's hard to imagine not having a daily practice where I go to that and ask for help or give thanks or whatever it is that my heart would leap up to say or do. But enough about me.
No, it sounds.
Let's talk about you.
No, I like listening.
What do you think about me?
I liked what you said. I think it's very. I mean, in the Jewish tradition, we want wrestling with God, so we're not just into surrender. Our little self and our big self are having a good time.
A good time?
There's famous Jewish stories like there were 10 rabbis interpreting the Torah, and 9 interpreted it one way, and one guy interpreted it another way. And the one guy said, if I'm right, may God thunder on this mountain. It's a beautiful day today. Let there be thunder at this moment if my interpretation is right. And then, bam, there's thunder. And the 9 rabbis said, okay, it's 9 against 2.
I've heard that. Not that story. That's a great story. But the idea of wrestling, the idea of grappling.
Yep.
And my sense is, from the little I know about the Jewish tradition, that that the faithful are constantly returning to the text and looking at it and evaluating it and arguing about it and pulling it apart and putting it together and trying to make sense of it in a way that's relevant right now.
Yes, and the Christians are doing this, of course, also on all the network televisions. They're reading about King David and making it relevant to their lives now. So it's very similar, but the Jews tend to emphasize that small, large dialogue, whereas there's a tendency in Christianity and Islam to "Thy will be done." Although, of course, Jesus, whose real name was Jeshua, would say
his real name was Jeshua.
Yeah, he was never called.
What do you mean?
He was never called Jesus in his life.
And are you saying that's because in the Aramaic that was the name?
Yes, that was the
Jeshua?
name. Yeah, Jesus is a Greek.
I see.
And Jesus didn't speak Greek.
Right.
Even
he was among the lower classes.
Yes.
He came from a poor town.
Yeah. But most Hebrews did not, or Jews did not speak Greek.
Right.
Actually, the Greek of the New Testament is like a pidgin Greek. It's not some ironic.
I'm not so sure about that, because St. Luke, who wrote both the Gospel of Luke and also the Acts of the Apostles, my understanding is that he was very well educated and he wrote in Greek.
Yeah.
And that it was good Greek.
His Greek might have been the best.
Okay.
But the other Greek was very pidgin Greek.
Okay.
So some scholars have said if God was the writer of the New Testament, he didn't know Greek very well.
Well, maybe he was just trying to reach the
people. Yes, like
the
basic,
masses.
I'm from Brooklyn. Basic English. Yes.
Don't give me no highfalutin
yes.
words.
Sorry. Forgive me, Lord. Whoops. Forgive me, Isabel. Yes. This is
Isabel. Are you watching right now?
Yes,
How are we doing? How are we doing so far?
Yes.
So where are we? Where were we?
So I was just commenting on that. For Jews, the big and little self, or the great spirit and our small being, there's an energetic dialogue without giving ourselves over to the greater self. Always, well, maybe there's another way of doing it. My favorite story, which I don't usually like to tell stories I know, and you can stop me, but it's about this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I feel about it now, but this has been very important to me because I once heard God tell me when I was living in Israel to jump off a roof. And I said, I'll
need some backstory on that. So you're living in Israel.
Yes.
You were living in a kibbutz?
Living on a rooftop.
On a rooftop, okay. And you had been living there for how long?
I had been from time to time when I couldn't find a place to stay living on the rooftop. And I knew some people who lived in the apartment building downstairs.
Okay, and you had been living at that time in Israel for how long?
Oh, maybe 2 years. I'm not certain.
Okay. And was this a time that you were feeling especially spiritual, or especially desperate, or going through like a personal crisis?
It was hard. I mean, I had a friend who said if he had a dime for every immigrant who was having a hard time, he'd be a very wealthy man. I mean, we were lonely, and in a foreign country, speaking a foreign language.
Mhm.
It was challenging.
And so so you're on the rooftop
Yeah,
right now. And what time of day is it?
in the morning.
In the morning. Has the sun already risen?
Oh yes,
Okay. What time of morning would you say it is?
I would guess, and I'm about maybe 9 o'clock.
Around 9 o'clock. And is it cool or is it
It's
hot?
very nice
Very
in
nice.
Jerusalem. I mean, it might be a little warm, but it doesn't rain for 9 months.
Okay. And what were you doing at the time?
Well, what comes to mind now is that I might have spent, not very successfully, a night with a woman,
Okay.
learning how to be a lover.
Okay. This was a new lover? that
We were lonely, and it was very easy.
you found each other? And,
People could, oh, would you please hug me? And
yeah. And
please
then,
touch
and then
me."
the next thing you know.
Yes. It
Okay.
was,
And so were the two of you together or were you alone?
no, I was alone now.
So she had left.
Yes.
She had left your place on the rooftop earlier.
Yes.
And so how much time had you, between the time that she left and the time that you heard this voice?
I'm recreating this as
Of
they
course.
do on television, but
Yeah.
I would say maybe a couple of hours. I might, knowing me, lie down and just try to find some peace
Okay.
and rest.
Okay. So you were in a restful, in a meditative kind of mode.
Or trying to be.
Trying to
Probably
be.
agitated.
Okay.
I had one friend, whenever he met me and saw me very agitated, he would say, "Oh, so you had a date last night?"
Ah. And you were in your 20s, is that what you said?
Early 30s.
Early 30s, okay. And so now we're coming to the moment
Mm-hmm.
where you heard the voice.
Yes.
And were you wide awake?
Yes.
And
I'm not unused to hearing an inner voice to guide me. I often didn't know what to do, especially in Israel.
Yeah.
And so I would just ask, okay, what should I do? And I would hear a commanding voice.
Yes.
My therapist called it the commander. Tell me things. And I needed them as commands. I didn't need them as suggestions.
I understand.
In order to
I understand the need for
get me
that.
to do something.
I understand the longing.
Yes. What should I do? You should eat breakfast now, or
Yes.
whatever, something
Yes.
like that. Go
Yes.
and talk to someone at the Hebrew University. I needed language like that at the time.
I'll tell you, just as an aside,
Yes.
recently at Mass there was a gospel reading. I guess this was maybe 2 or 3 months ago. But this was the story of Jesus and the apostles the apostles had gone out into the boat. They had gone across the Great Lake. And partway across, the weather rose up, the waves rose up. They were in fear for their lives because it was a terrible, terrible storm. And then Jesus appears walking on the water toward them. And they're terrified. And he says, "Don't be afraid. It's just me." And Peter says something like, he asks, I wish I had a scholar with me now.
Well, I do remember that Peter started walking toward him.
He did walk toward him, but the key moment for me in hearing that was Peter saying, "Command me, Lord, to come to you."
Mm-hmm.
And I really related to that in the same way that I relate to you asking for the commandment,
Mm-hmm.
not a suggestion.
Yeah.
I want a commandment. Do this.
Yeah.
And that's what you got.
Yeah.
You got a commandment.
Yes. Repeated. I mean, for many years in my life, I was living this way with commandments.
And this commandment, can you remember exactly what it said?
As I remember it, as best as I do, this is almost 40 years. This was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Was jump off the roof, with not in any screaming way.
Was it accompanied by any kind of feeling?
I think I was maybe just confused, just like I would not know what to do for the morning. Not a particular, chaotic time. I've had more chaotic times in Israel that were life-threatening, just internally, but this was not one of them.
So you heard this voice say, jump off the roof.
Yeah.
And what did you do?
Because I was in Israel then, and whenever I'm in difficulty, I retreat to my mind, at least then, and my mind came up with, at the moment, oh my, because I was bothered by the command, but, oh my, Israel means to wrestle with God, so my inner voice must be encouraging me to wrestle with it. I wanted to preserve.
Good mind.
I wanted to preserve.
Good call.
I was like I took care of my mother. I was taking care of my commander. I was like saying, okay, you're really.
I'm here to tell you,
you're
man.
a good commander. I don't have to go against you. I know you're teaching me to wrestle against, fight you. Thank you for this lesson, Commander.
You did the right thing, and you're here to tell us about
I'm
it.
here to tell us to hell, yes.
Yes, inner voices can be very attractive, can be very seductive, and it's hard to discern at times between, and that's a word that's used very much in my tradition, Christian or Catholic tradition, of discerning between a voice that is the voice of God, or the voice of good, or the voice of good, versus a voice that's not so good. But the thing about these inner commandments is that they can be very attractive, they can be very seductive, and I think that people have been seduced, and we have plenty of examples throughout history of people who have been seduced by inner voices that are urging them to do something other than good, and to act in a way that other than love. And it sounds to me that if you had followed that commandment, you would not have been loving your body or loving yourself. You would have been doing a great disservice to this wonderful being that is Michael Koran by ending his life right then and there.
There was no question that I would do that. I mean, I had been used to, even then, suicidal thoughts most days.
Mm-hmm.
Not from a command, but just from feeling.
Yes.
So there was no way. I was like, talk about practice. I was well practiced with suicidal thoughts. Well practiced, not almost out of spite. There's no way I'm going to do that. I once convinced someone not to commit suicide out of spite. I said, you're a leftist, you're a liberal, you don't want those conservatives to have one over us by getting rid of one of our number. And she didn't kill herself till about 30 years later, and then she did kill herself. We should just a moment for Susan Wilkins. Thank you for staying with us 30 more years.
I think one of the things that people who take their own lives don't recognize, certainly in the moment that they do it, is the kind of hole, the kind of vacuum that they leave behind, and the effect that their action is going to have on those people that love and care for them. And I don't think it's easy to see. I mean, anybody who takes their own life does so in a moment of great desperation. And I'm sure that it's hard to see into the hearts and lives of someone else when they are feeling that, when they are suffering that much and feeling that desperate. There is an anecdote that I want to share because I, like you, have done my bit of wrestling with those kind of thoughts. But there is something that I want to share. It's from a documentary that I saw a couple of years ago called The Bridge. And it's about the Golden Gate Bridge, which is the world's most favorite place for committing suicide. There is no other place in the entire world where it is often done. And maybe one of the reasons is because it's almost guaranteed. It's so high off of the water that the likelihood of surviving that is very, very slim. And this was in this documentary called The Bridge. There was a brief interview with somebody who did survive. And he was describing how he had been thinking about taking his life for quite some time, and in fact would walk back and forth across the bridge fairly regularly, just waiting for that moment, that impulse, where he heard the voice, jump off the bridge, and then just did it. And he did survive it, with his legs broken in several places, and I think he was physically quite damaged from it. But the thing that I will never forget is that he said that the instant he left the bridge, he knew that he wanted to live.
Wow. Oh, my. That's a very interesting story.
And I think that my suspicion is that those who succeed...
If you want to keep going, you can when it's not coming in.
Thanks. I'd love to.
We just learned that we have another half hour.
Thank you. Yes.
Where was I?
You were saying the instinct to live when he was jumping. He discovered as he was jumping off.
I think that the impulse to take one's own life, more often than not, is an impulse. I mean, there may be planning, but the instant that it's done is dependent on an impulse of great desperation or of great despair.
Pain, too, yes.
Pain, yes. So I suppose preparation for that would be something like, walking back and forth across the bridge and simply making yourself available to it.
Mm-hmm.
We came to a dark place. We're in a dark place talking about a dark thing right now.
Well, now that we have another half hour, I could tell. This is not an anecdote. This is a story I've told many times. You can, but it was.
Have you told it here on this show?
I might have many years ago. It was what I haven't told it for a long time. It was one of my favorite stories for a long time. You can stop me if you've heard it. This is about the person climbing the mountain. And
fortunately, I've reached an age where I forget a lot.
Oh, good.
So tell me everything. I think that I have not heard it.
So it's a beautiful day like today. He's climbing a mountain. We just went to northern New Hampshire and climbed the mountain. And at the top of the mountain, which was true in New Hampshire, it had just rained. But some of us are so overwhelmed with the view that we forget, which is a great challenge for me, to pay attention to our feet. And so our hero starts sliding down the mountain. Because it's slippery and it's wet, but he's an actor. He's trained as an actor, and he's very quick, and he grabs hold of a tree growing out of kind of a bush-like tree, and he's strong because he's been through a lot, and he's holding on to the tree, but eventually even he gets tired, and he looks around. There's this beautiful day, somewhat like today, sees one cloud in the sky, and like ourselves, he's religiously open, and he cries, "Can anyone hear me? Can anyone hear me?" And he's very imaginative. He's into, the arts as well as other things. And he can hear a voice from the other side of the cloud, and it says to him, "I hear you, my son. Just let go of that bush and fall into my arms." And our hero thinks for a moment and looks around and cries, "Can anyone else hear me?"
I've heard it before, but it was better the way you told it.
So that was crucial for me from that experience in the rooftop.
Yeah.
As well as I eventually got to the place, I don't always do this, with the help of my therapist actually, where if I hear a voice command me to do anything, I'll say, no one talks to me that way. Either I'm going to be talked to kindly and respectfully, or that's it. I'm not going to listen.
That's where I want to get. I want to be there.
You can just say it.
All right.
These,
But I'll need to write it down on like a cue card and just carry it around with me.
I'm happy to give you a present that you could, like a stone, you could hold in your hand.
Okay. Well, a half hour is behind us.
Yes.
Another half hour is ahead.
Yes, with no agenda.
No agenda.
We don't have an agenda, yes.
Now what? I guess I'm going to start just by shifting.
We can change sides now since you wanted to sit, if you want to.
Would that be good TV or would that not be good TV? I don't know. I think that would be Three Stooges TV.
Okay. But we have to respect Isabel, who's still with us.
We hope she's still.
Yes.
I think we lost her in a goof off a long time ago.
Elizabeth is very understanding and merciful.
Can we bail out if we have to, or are we committed now?
We are committed.
Okay.
Yes. A lot of people want to call, but
let's take a chance. Let's take a call.
Okay.
Let's take a call.
Press on then. Okay.
All right.
Say hello. Say hello.
Hello.
Yes, I had an inner voice tell me that if I keep on calling and 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 keep on calling and calling and calling and calling, that there was going to be an answer. And I said to the inner voice, "You're out of your mind. I'm not going to do that. You think I'm crazy? I don't want to keep calling and calling and calling and calling and calling. If they don't want to answer the phone, forget about it." It says, "Why should I keep calling?" They're not going to answer the phone. So that's it. So I gave up calling, and I went back to what I was doing. And I figured, that's it. They're not taking calls, so I'm not going to call anymore. And the voice kept on saying, I think you should go back and give it another call. So I said, well, and maybe in another 10 minutes or so I'll give it a call, but I'm not going to spend the whole Sunday calling and calling and calling. So I just came back when I thought of it again.
Thank you. Thank you for calling. This is the first call that we have ever taken on the God Talk guys. So you're number one. So
he has a lot to say about God also. But what
do you know who this is?
Yes, it's his show. We're on. He gave us the show. This is
thank you.
This is the Shaman. This is Shaman Smith speaking. So Shaman Smith, could you tell us who is God?
It's my half hour. It's my show.
Yes.
So you are hearing the voice speaking to you from above, telling you that you're doing a great job.
So
and keep
Lloyd,
up the good
Lloyd,
work.
Who is God to you now?
Pardon me?
Who is God to you now?
Well, who is God to me? God, while you were discussing this, from time to time I was busy working on something in the kitchen, so I would catch parts of your discussion. And you were talking about prayer, and you were exchanging your different experiences of prayer and the Jewish background to prayer and the Catholic background to prayer. And while you were discussing this, I had this image in my mind of the planet, of the human race on the planet sitting in a room around a table where there was a glass of water on the table, and they called the glass of water God. And they had different ways. Oh no, I'm sorry. They called the glass of water Jehovah. They called the glass of water Allah, and they called the glass of water God, and they called the glass of water Buddha. And they're arguing and arguing, and sometimes the argument would actually become physical. and they would actually get up and take one another's lives because they didn't agree on the name of this object in the middle of the table with water in it. They couldn't agree on it. And also they would say, if you don't agree on the name that I have for this object on the table, you will be cast into hell, and you will be damned and lost forever. And that's my experience of what is commonly called God, and that is my experience of what's commonly considered to be religious practice.
And I'm sorry, go on.
But that does not mean in any way at all, I do not in any way at all reach the opposite conclusion of those who completely disconnect from the glass of water on the table, saying, if that's the way people are going to relate to the glass of water on the table, then my position is there is no glass of water on the table.
Well, the point that you raise is one that I think, well, in discussions that I've had with a couple of friends who are atheists recently, they've raised that very issue, saying that religion seems to create more division than it does unity, and there have been countless wars, sectarian wars, waged over religion. So that sounds like you're coming to a similar conclusion.
However, I'm very quick to say that I'm extremely spiritual, and quote unquote, God is very, very real to me. And I've got years and years of religious training to the point where I pretty much know the Bible in my mind, in my memory, so I don't even have to access anything that I need at a particular moment. I can simply call it up to my memory with that kind of handle that I have on the Western teachings, I like to say, of the scriptures, I like to say, using that kind of more universal language to express my experience. So is that God is very real to me, and the only thing is that my God, I like to say, has no name, and as a result, if the world were to practice my way, there would be no reason to slaughter anybody, and all those thousands, millions actually, of lives that were lost through the pages of human history would never have happened, because it could only have happened because God had a name.
So it sounds like you're saying
always
that,
in the name of God that people were slaughtered.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that if everybody practiced in the way that you practice, then there would be no problem, there would be no trouble. And it sounds like also, when you use the metaphor of the glass of water, that each of the people sitting around the table representing a different religion or a different point of view are coming basically to this conclusion: either you're with me or you're against me. And I think that, who can argue with that as being one of the fundamental reasons for a lot of the sectarian conflicts we have? I'm right, you're wrong. But I think that's where religion or spirituality tends to cross over into, well, maybe into politics. Please jump in and make me smarter.
No, I mean, I pray that the greater selves that people are hearing, or that the God that they're hearing, would tell them what Lloyd is saying.
Lloyd, why aren't you here? Why aren't you here doing this show? Why are we in your place? How did that happen? Are you at home? Are you in the kitchen right now? You are in the kitchen.
I command you to come to me.
Okay, crew, let's pick up the camera and go.
Well, you certainly commanded us. You commanded us to be sitting here now.
Michael, I'm sorry. I was laughing too much to hear you. Could you say that again?
That was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago. I mean, I think I was saying that I would like this greater expanding spirit, body, spirit, to say to all the people who pray what you just said. Don't, everybody's following me in their own way. Don't harm anybody, which is really the heart of the religions anyway.
It seems to me that that's true, that the heart of the great religions is be kind, don't hurt each other.
Yes, certainly don't harm each other. Thou shalt not kill.
I like to say, when I'm having this discussion, I like to say that millions and millions of lives were lost, and millions of lives were subjected to unbelievable torture, all in the name of love.
Yes.
Because that's the fundamental teaching.
I have to disagree with you there.
That is the fundamental teaching, I'm saying.
It is a fundamental teaching.
That's the fundamental teaching of all the religions.
I think that we can generally agree that that is a fundamental teaching. And yet, I don't think that they were practicing love by...
Oh, no, not at all.
You both agree with each other.
I didn't say that they did that. I didn't say they did that in the practice of love. I said they did it in the name of love, not in the practice.
Okay, we might be splitting hairs. But Michael says that we agree.
Yeah,
so...
you agree. Lloyd is just saying
Oh,
that
yeah.
in the name
no,
of love,
we do.
I am saving your soul by burning your body.
Thank you.
They believed that when they were killing witches, women. They believed they were killing the witchcraft in them. And they were helping them.
There was this, if I'm remembering correctly, and if I had a historian here, he could help me out on this, but my understanding from the trials that they would put suspected witches through back in the colonial days in America was that they would dunk them into water and put them down. They would strap them to a chair and push the chair down into the water until they were completely submerged. And if they drowned, then they were
guilty.
No, if they drowned, then they were not guilty. But if they didn't drown, then it means they were guilty and they needed to be put to death.
No, I heard it the other way around.
Really?
I heard.
No, that's true. No, that's true. That's true. That's true. They were put underwater to see whether or not they were witches. And if they were able to, if they were still alive after they were put on the water, if they were still alive, that was proof that they were witches.
Because they had some special kind of witchcraft that allowed them to breathe underwater.
Ever heard of that?
That's how they were able to survive the water.
Doesn't sound like a win-win situation.
But I heard once before that discussion with another guest that Michael had on, who was extremely articulate. Michael, if you can help me with my senior moment memory, someone who wrote a book and came on discussing religion.
Oh yes, his name is.
And maybe you could give him an acknowledgement again today.
It's James Hodge. I'm not sure it's James. I think so. And he showed me that love your neighbor as yourself is a political statement. It really is a statement that can transform our politics with one another, because since people believe that, that would be a call for democracy.
Well, Jesus was, I think it's safe to say, a left-wing radical.
Jesus was a communist.
Some have said.
Jesus was a communist.
And
the first practice of Christianity, was a practice of communism, which was described in the scriptures, because they said that, and they held everything that they owned. This is in the scriptures now. I'm quoting the scriptures. They held everything that they had that they owned in common.
Right, but it might be better to call Jesus socialist, because he wasn't in favor, at least his students were not in favor of violent overthrow of the governments. So they were really more like, I lived on a kibbutz in Israel. They where also most everything was in common.
Well, you see, you have to be careful. You have to be careful about how you associate people's practices with the definition of the principle. Because the people who practice communism, torture, and prison, and do all these things, doesn't mean that's part of the original principle of communism any more than the way in which people are being deprived of the kind of justice and treatment for generations in this country, including right now, can be considered to be part of the teachings principles of democracy. You make that mistake if you assume that democracy is something that's typified by the experience of living in this country. That's not what democracy is at all, any more than communism is typified by what the practices were with Stalin. So, and again, the glass of water on the table, human justice, a sense of fairness between people, and then we have these different institutional descriptions in religion and institutional descriptions in politics that completely blurs the picture. So we lose complete sight of the kinds of things that we need to get a hold of and the kind of thing that we need to practice. I'm going to give this back to the two of you and thank you for a wonderful substitution here in spreading the word, and encourage you to complete the half hour and do it simply by continuing the conversation as if you were sitting outside on the roof in Israel and enjoying the sunset. That's it for now.
Thank you, brother.
Shaman Smith.
Bye-bye.
Shaman Smith. We'll see you next week.
That's blessings.
Okay. So that's off.
Yes, that's all.
So my question,
Yes.
about that glass of water on the table,
Yes.
and no disrespect intended, but we are the goof off guys. Is it half empty or half full?
I had a friend. Well, one, he said, some people say if you wait long enough, it'll evaporate. And then my friend said, and if you wait a little longer than that, it will rain and it will be full. Overflowing.
Now let us pause for station identification. This is Be Live at CCTV in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And we are the God Talk guys, or we are the God Talk guys on A Human Among Humans. Aha! A Human Among Humans, which is Michael Koran's weekly show. And so here we are again with, it looks like about 12 minutes to get to the real nub.
Less, it ends at 7:57, so we have 9 minutes.
9 minutes, okay. To get to the real nub, to get to the real rub, to get to the point of this whole show today and the point of this whole life that we are living.
Wow.
Sum it up. What have you got to say for yourself, man? What do you got to say for all of us?
I thought I already did. I think I thank God for Jeshua. Love your neighbor as yourself, right?
Yes.
And love the Lord your God, or the great expanding self of us and Cambridge and Massachusetts and America and the world and the galaxy and solar system, galaxy. So to love God and love your neighbor as yourself with all your heart. That's a hard one for me. All your heart and your soul and your might. I think those are 3 ways they say it. They might say it other ways.
Heart and mind and strength is the way I've heard it.
Oh, heart and mind and strength. You might have heard it. Yes. That would be wonderful.
Well, one of our viewers, who is a very, very dear friend of mine, a few weeks ago when I was on and we were talking and I brought out that passage in the scripture because that's one that's very meaningful to me, to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, and strength, and love thy neighbor as thyself.
Yes.
And my beloved friend said that, you know, I don't know if I would want to be loved in the way that some people love themselves.
Oh, yes, yes.
And what she added to this, which I think
Yes.
is really beautiful, and now I include in my my recollection of that scripture passage, is another thing that Jesus said, which is to love one another as I have loved you. And I happened to see that today when I was at the Paulus Center, which is a Catholic church in downtown Boston, right next to the Park Street station, that it was on the wall of the church. And it is a beautiful passage and an aspirational passage. And what else did Jesus say? That there is no love greater than that of laying down one's life for one's friends. To give up the greatest thing that we have, the only thing that we have while we're alive. That is the courage and love in doing that is great indeed. Jesus was a Jew, as were all of the apostles. Any thoughts about that, my Jewish friend?
Well, I'm proud. One of us. And some people are starting to use the names. Willis Barnstone has a translation of the gospel where all the names are the Jewish names. So when you're praying to Mary, Mary tends to take away from the fact that she was a Jewish mother. Miriam. Miriam. Joshua, Yosef, instead of James, Yaakov. So all these names, when they're Jewish names, might help the world remember that Jeshua's name was Jeshua, or maybe Joshua. They're not certain, but one or the other.
Well, when you talk about Jewish names, I can't help but remember the sermon that I heard this morning at the Paulus Center, in which our priest spoke about the word Yahweh, the sacred name of God among the Israelites. And what he suggested was, or what he heard was, or maybe what he read was, that Yahweh was like a mirror for the breath.
Mm-hmm.
The Yah was bringing the breath in,
Yeah.
and the Way was letting the breath out.
Great. The breath of life.
The breath of life.
Yes.
And there's that passage in the New Testament of Jesus breathing on the disciples before he left, before he ascended into heaven, as a way to pass on the Spirit to them. And of course, that's, as Genesis would have it, that's the way the world began, was with God breathing life
Into Adam.
into Adam. Air is good. I like air.
Oh, good.
Air is fun.
So we have 4 minutes to sum up for Isabel and Shaman Smith, what we would like to leave them with this evening, or leave us with, or
What we're going to walk out of the studio with and take out into the world. Well, come on, man. Give me something.
I like the Quakers. The Quakers we can sit in silence.
Oh, okay.
We can.
Quaker TV.
Sometimes Quakers do this. We sit around the living room and we're having a conversation, and the silence comes, and the Quakers stay with the silence.
Let me just break that silence.
Yes, you can do that too. Yes.
I have found myself practicing that in little ways more and more. That in conversation with somebody, when we suddenly both notice that there is a silence has descended. I notice in myself this sort of desperate urgency to say something. Somebody say something. Because we don't want things to get weird. We don't want things to be uncomfortable. And so I've been practicing just holding the silence just for a little bit, just for a moment longer than I think I can, just to see what might happen. And I'd like to add that some years back, I did a 10-day silent retreat in Western Mass at the Insight Center there, and the Insight Meditation Center at Shelburne Falls. And it was total silence. It was total silence for 9 of those 10 days. And I couldn't do it. Every couple of days, I had to go out into the woods by myself and just start talking. Just start talking.
Alone, outside?
Yes.
To no one?
Yes, to no one. Or to God, or to however you want to think about it. I needed to say something.
Oh, but you couldn't just think it. Huh.
Not enough.
My.
I had to engage my body and my voice in it. I've got something to say.
Wow.
I have an opinion about this.
Was this allowed, or was it far enough away to...
Nobody knew that I was.
You didn't tell your teacher?
Oh, no.
Don't you check in with your teacher when you do this?
I didn't. No, but that wasn't part of the protocol. That wasn't. I don't recall that being a part of the daily practice. But I had to just get out there and say something.
And then you felt better.
And I felt better. I felt like I clarified some things. I put some things in order by saying it, by articulating.
Oh, even better. Oh, I
Yeah.
think it made things clearer for yourself.
Yes. Yes. If only to say, I feel horrible.
Yes.
I really feel horrible. I just gotta say that.
Yes, that can help. Yes. Oh, let me tell you how horrible I really am feeling.
Well, complaining has a long history.
Yes, born to kvetch.
Yes, kvetch, born to kvetch. Kvetch.
Kvetch, yes.
How much time do we have?
We have no time.
Is that it?
Yes, this is, yes, that's it.
We're
Yes.
done?
Yeah. We could say goodbye on the tape.
Okay. You know?
Very quickly, about 10 seconds each, yes.
Okay, go.
Thanks for joining us, Isabel. God be with us.
Thank you, everybody. And it does seem like the sudden end is often the way that the big end comes. So we're all practicing for that. Goodbye, everybody.
Wow.
Love you.